Hello everybody, welcome to the channel, I'm Recurs. And so guys, I've done a bit of homework recently, and the homework that I pretty much was doing was what will the next Battlefield game be, when will it release, and pretty much I found a couple sources, not big strong sources, but a couple decent sources that have talked about the game, potentially what the setting could be and what my own opinion will be on the game. Now again, anything I'm about to say in this video, a lot of it is my own opinion, so take that with a pinch of salt, but at the same time it's sort of backed up by evidence from other franchises and of course the sources, so please keep that in mind whenever you're listening to this video. Okay, so let's talk about the potential release date. Many people have actually said that the next Battlefield game is set to release in 2024, sort of a role reverse when you consider 2042, 2024. I just personally thought that was funny. But anyway, the next game is set to release in 2024 and it's apparently going to be a modern day setting game. Now again, that's as far as we know about the game. It's going to be a modern setting game, so it is. I personally think that's the smartest approach when it comes to Battlefield, because if we look at the success the Battlefield's had in recent years, a lot of that success has been due to the modern day setting games. Bad Company 1, Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3 and of course Battlefield 4 were all modern day setting games, and all of them, sales, critical reception, it was all great, so it was. Obviously there was a couple hiccups upon the way, so there was, but for the most part, the finished products, if we look back at all four of those games, were solid entries in the franchise. And if you want to be picky about it, you can even go as far back as maybe Battlefield 2, which came back, I do believe, way back in 2004. It was also a modern day setting game. So the franchise, at its core, it's not like, say, Medal of Honor, where it's at its core, it's a World War II game, or Call of Duty, which started out as a World War II, then slowly evolved. Battlefield made the jump relatively quick, so it did, and it went to the modern setting, and it's had great success with it. Now, why I believe personally that the modern day setting is going to be the best choice for Battlefield is mainly because DICE and whatever studios are working on the game with them, I'm sure there'll be more than just DICE. But that aside, all these studios who will be involved with the game, they can pretty much play with all sorts of, weapons, vehicles, settings in terms of like global scale, like where it is positioned on the globe. They can pretty much do a lot more with a modern day setting game. Plus, with the modern setting, you can do a lot more in terms of realism. If you want to take the approach of, say, a realistic shooter based on real world events, you can do that, of course, like they did with, Battlefield 1, I was about to say Call of Duty, apologies, different franchise. Battlefield Vietnam, of course, based on real world events. So if you want to take the realism approach, it's there, and you can do a lot with the modern day setting game. Obviously, another game that did this, pretty well was the 2010 Medal of Honor, which was based on Operation Anaconda and the Battle of Roberts Ridge. It was a realistic approach, it was, and it did very well in terms of critical reception and fan reception. Again, I'm going to not go into too much on that because it's a different franchise, and I want to talk about this, so I do. But you get the point. The point is, you can do a lot with realism. Or you can do fictional, which is pretty much what Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 and of course the Bad Company series are. They're fictional war stories, so they are. Of course they take elements, from, real world events like weapons and so forth, but for the most part, they're just fictional stories. But again, with a modern setting, you can do that, you can play with it. And like I said, the whole multiplayer aspect, it can work great, so it can in the modern setting. For me personally, my favourite Battlefield game is of course Battlefield 4, so it is. And that was a modern day setting game, and I love the game, so I think it's got so much replayability to it. If you can go back, you can play it now and it still feels great. It actually doesn't feel like a game that came out in 2013. If you ask me personally, I think it feels great. So we know it's going to be a modern day setting game according to all these sources. We know we'll have a potential release date, so we do, of October 2024. Now, it may not necessarily be October because the Battlefield franchise has sort of been a bit all over the place with releases. If we look at, for instance, Battlefield Hardline, it came out in March 2015, I do believe. And then of course we had Bad Company 2, which also came out in March 2010. So, the Battlefield franchise, it really does play with its release dates, but on average it releases on October of whatever calendar year it's releasing. So for instance, 2042 released in October of 2021, and then Battlefield 3 and 4 released in the October of 2011 and 2013. So you get the point, it's generally speaking an October release for the Battlefield franchise. Okay, so the rest of this video is going to be pretty much just my own opinions and my own thoughts, and pretty much why I think that the next game could be Bad Company 3. And so here we go. The first number one reason is of course the Battlefield franchise itself in the last couple of releases, namely Battlefield 5 and of course 2042. It's been going downhill, so it has been, the critical reception hasn't been that great, the fan reaction hasn't been that great. And it pretty much feels like when it comes to these games, whenever they release their last, DLC or season, whatever you want to call it, it generally does get better, so it does. That's the state that everyone looks at the game goes, it wasn't a bad game, too bad, its launch was terrible. But with 2042, something more extreme happened on the EA side of things, and that was the financial report and the financial feedback that they got. 2042 wasn't a financial hit whatsoever. It was actually quite a disappointment. If you listen to all EA's sort of conference calls that they did in, I do believe, January 2022, they quoted 2042 as a disappointment in terms of its sales. Now, a lot of people were sort of looking at this and going, well, it's to do with a pandemic, and it's to do with the quality of the game. A lot of people waited to hear what reviewers and so forth said, and a lot of reviewers just didn't, give the game a good score, so it didn't. And to be honest, I can't really blame them because the game released pretty much unfinished. It did release unfinished, there's no question about it. Which actually brings me to Battlefield Bad Company 3 potentially. Now, if we look across the pond, if we see what the competition did with Call of Duty, now again, this is a bit of story time, so sit back and enjoy. Call of Duty with Infinite Warfare, World War II, and even Black Ops 4 wasn't doing that well. The sales weren't that great. People were just sort of like, meh, the games aren't that great, don't feel great. And then Infinity Ward in 2019 released a trailer for the rebooted Modern Warfare series, and like that Call of Duty had a spike. People were excited about the game. The game itself was on like news outlets, obviously for the wrong reasons. Depicting certain things that shouldn't be seen according to like government and so forth in games. But the point is that they were being ballsy again, which people were really happy about. People were so happy that Call of Duty was, in many ways, back to a degree. It was getting rid of the whole childish aesthetic, so it was, and going for a much more adult, more darker driven sort of focus. And I personally was really excited about this. And then when the game actually came out, the sales were great, the feedback was great. Obviously amongst the community it was a bit mixed. Some people loved the new direction they went with the maps and so forth. But for the most part, the important aspect for a company like Activision was the sales were great. Now again, this takes me back to EA. 2042 had bad sales. Battlefield 5 had not bad sales, but not as good as say Battlefield 1 or 4 or even 3 if you want to talk about that. Now here's the thing, since 2010, Battlefield Bad Company 3 has pretty much been a demand from the fanbase. A lot of people have been saying, just give us Bad Company 3, it's the game we want, it's the game we're waiting on. And for a lot of time people did think that it would eventually happen. Like for instance, Battlefield 3 in 2011, a lot of people were expecting it to be Bad Company 3, mainly because Bad Company 2 ended on a massive cliffhanger, but EA chose, no, we're going to focus on mainline Battlefield game. And realistically they decided to release Battlefield 3. Again, Battlefield 3 was a great game, but the campaign was meh. And if you look at the Bad Company series, the campaign is a driving focus of that game. The characters were written so well, the stories acted out so good, and even the set pieces that the campaign has itself are great. So it always did surprise me as to why EA never sort of returned to this setting. And I think if you look at it now across the board, EA will be strongly suggesting they go back to this setting because they know that it'll sell well, they know a lot of people want it. So if we look at what EA have done in late 2021, they brought on Marcus Leto, who has worked on the Halo franchise. He's made some of the best, campaigns of the series, so it has. And a lot of people really respect him in the gaming industry and think that he's a great studio head to have. EA have actually set up a new campaign-focused studio for the Battlefield franchise with him running it. Now, again, a lot of people, they could just be saying, well, it's just going to be a campaign studio, what's the big deal? Battlefield has never been known for its campaigns other than the Bad Company series that it's had. If you look at the campaigns, a lot of people do say, Battlefield 3's was bad, Battlefield 4's was okay, and then the war stories I think a lot of people got really fed up with when it came to Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. I think a lot of people just wanted a solid, focused campaign, but of course 2042 never launched with a campaign. So what then happens is EA sort of look at it and go, okay, again, Bad Company's campaign, people loved it, it worked. They get a team on who can actually develop a great story. Now the reason I say they get a team on is because the guys who made Bad Company 1 and 2 and of course Battlefield 3 and 4, they're no longer working at DICE. They moved on to a different studio to do other development stuff. And so pretty much Battlefield's just got a bunch of DICE guys who probably realistically just work on the multiplayer aspect and have no real focus on the campaigns. So it makes a lot of sense that EA would focus on a story driven campaign. And the fact that they're putting so much resources into a campaign studio. Now if we look at campaigns for developers like EA or publishers, whatever you want to call them, they don't really make a lot of money, so they don't. I get, people like cinematic approaches, and if we look at even the likes of the Last of Us series, it's just story focused and a lot of people love it. But when it comes to an FPS game, a lot of people aren't playing an FPS game no more so for the campaign. A lot of people are generally playing it for the multiplayer aspect. So the fact that EA is really focusing and putting a lot of resources into a campaign studio for Battlefield, it really makes me think that they have an idea that they're going somewhere really deep with a campaign, so they are. Again, it's just my own opinion, but I don't see why EA would be, fully focusing on the campaign side of things unless they want to, do something really big with it. And if we look at what the Battlefield series has had, so let's tick off what we have pretty much so far. We'll have a modern day setting, which was what Bad Company 1 and 2 were. We'll have a campaign studio that's been built that's solely focused on campaign. Battlefield Bad Company 1 and 2 were stories that were built on the characters around them. They were great characters. People loved the campaigns, and the campaigns got a lot of great reception from critics and fans alike. So why else would you build a campaign studio when Battlefield in the last couple of years hasn't really cared about the campaign? So there's Tech 2 if you ask me. Then of course we have DICE, who can solely focus in on the multiplayer aspect, which realistically, you know, some people say, well, based off their last work, I'm not too sure about that. But I just think it ticks all the boxes that EA are either going to potentially do a Bad Company free, because first of all, let's look at their whole financial side of things. Bad Company is a franchise that could probably get, you know, Battlefield back to where they want it to be. They could bring in a lot of the nostalgic sort of legacy fans, if you want to call them. It could bring a lot of those guys in. It could also, you know, because of brand recognition, work well in terms of sales. And realistically, I don't really think that they can do much more, because if they do a sequel to 2042, based off the reception 2042 had, I don't think a lot of people will be very open towards that, so don't. Whereas if they do, say, you know, even another World War II game or World War I game, again, I don't think a lot of people are after those at the minute. I think World War II games had their bit of a resurgence and then they've done again, if that makes sense. Vietnam's interesting, but I don't think that the EA wants to really go to Vietnam. Plus, we know from these that it's a modern day setting, you know, game that they're working on. It's leaked that it's going to be a modern day setting game. So again, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to do any of that. The only thing that I look at EA and say you could do is Bad Company free. I just think all the sort of directions pointed at. But again, this has just been a video where, you know, I've just been talking about it. It's just been a bit of fun. If you like the video, if you agree with what I said, of course, please leave a like. It really helps out the channel, so it does. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and plan on doing a lot more Battlefield stuff. If you're interested in 2042, I have a lot of stuff, you know, lined up to come out for that game, so do. And for those of you guys who are subscribed for my Medal of Honor stuff, don't worry, I have Medal of Honor stuff. I'm working on it. I have, you know, a couple ideas. I have an idea of what I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks with Medal of Honor. And that's pretty much it. You know, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. You know, it helps out a lot. And yeah, show some support. It's free. You know, I've been Recurge, you've been you. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. Peace.